Hello, Archie Dunlop here with Talking Astrology with Archie, and in this video I'm going to be looking at the weekend of April the 5th and the 6th, 2025. So it's quite a busy weekend astrologically. A lot of things going on. We've got first quarter moon, we've got Venus trine Mars, we've got Mars trine Saturn, and yeah, it's all happening. And in this video I want to look at some of these events and go into detail about them and consider what it all might mean. And additionally we've got Uranus around 25 Taurus, and so Uranus is moving towards Donald Trump's midheaven. I was thinking about that, Uranus on Donald Trump's midheaven. And, last year when he was running for the presidency, one speculated about what Uranus was doing to his chart, and one might be thinking he might be in danger. One could even forecast almost that assassination attempt in Butler, Pennsylvania, in Butler County, Pennsylvania. Was that right? On July the 13th. But it was someone from the outside. Things were happening to them. Now he's president of the United States. He is the king. Particularly him, but whoever is the president kind of is like the king. And, we take that ancient sort of medieval formula, the land is the king and the king is the land. So now Uranus hitting Donald Trump's midheaven isn't just Donald Trump's problem, it's America's problem, because he's the head of state. Well, I say problem, that is one view of looking at it. Certainly mainstream media is thinking that these tariffs are a complete disaster. There are alternative views that they're not necessarily as bad as they seem. They weren't just random, and there may be a method to it all. And so for my own part, I keep an open mind about the tariffs. So this underlines the point. There is a lot going on. There's a lot going on to Trump, and it's certainly affecting Americans, and it's affecting all of us, and it's not just about the tariffs. And it is quite a complex weekend. Yeah, lots going on, and I will be looking at that in detail. But to begin with, let's just do my usual look at the astrology and the I Ching for the weekend, on a fairly sort of grounded level, not being too global about it. And by the way, if you like this video, I'd be very happy if you were indeed to like it. If you're not subscribed, just a reminder, I would be very happy to have you as a subscriber. So here is the picture for the weekend. As far as the thumbnail is concerned, well, it's the first quarter moon this weekend, so I've stated this fact. First quarter moon. Just a reminder, it's always good to be in tune with the lunar cycle. And turning to what is happening this weekend, it's transitional in some respects, at least from a lunar perspective. So here is the chart for midnight on Sunday, April the 6th. Which I think April the 6th, if you're in the UK, that's the beginning of the tax year, isn't it? A new tax year. So if you're in the UK, tax might be of some concern to you. I haven't been in the UK for a long time, but I seem to remember that April the 6th is the beginning of the British tax year. And even though it's a Sunday, I think they start, doesn't matter what day of the week it is, it always starts on April the 6th. So here is the chart for the weekend, set for noon, and we have there's the moon at the very end of Cancer. So really Saturday is a moon in Cancer day, Sunday is a moon in Leo day, and UK time the moon moves into Leo at 5:34 a.m. on Sunday morning. So if you're in Africa, the Americas, Europe, then Sunday's moon in Leo, Saturday is moon in Cancer. And the moon makes a lot of aspects in Cancer. I mean, it's for a start, we've got the first quarter moon, so that's when the moon is making a square to the sun. That is right at the beginning of a weekend, and later in this video I'll be going into more detail about this first quarter moon. And then the moon moves on, it makes sextile to Uranus, it makes a trine to Saturn, and the moon does make a conjunction to Mars on Saturday. So moon conjunct Mars can be quite difficult. It can be quite angry, especially as it is triggering, well, it's triggering several things. It's triggering a Venus-Mars trine, and it's also triggering a Mars-Saturn trine. So that Moon-Mars conjunction could actually be more powerful than usual because it's hitting a load of other aspects. And with Moon-Mars conjunction, there are things that we can get annoyed about. So there's no doubt about that. But it may be moderated by the fact that once the moon has finished making its conjunction to Mars, it makes sextiles to Venus and Mercury. So we might have a lot of energy, a lot of anger, but maybe we can use the right words to smooth things over, especially as the moon is in Cancer and Mercury and Venus are in Pisces. So it's not a super fiery trine, and it is more watery, more emotional, and perhaps a little more sensitive. And then the moon moves into Leo. And, when the moon moves into Leo, it makes a trine to Neptune and makes an opposition to Pluto. So from a lunar perspective, Sunday perhaps isn't quite as busy as Saturday. And, overall, I would tend to think that the action is on Saturday rather than Sunday. Though, moon moving into Leo, that's moon in a fire sign. So we haven't had so much fire recently because planets have moved out of Aries, and the main planet in fire has just been the sun all on its own, and now the moon is joining the sun. We've got the moon in a fire sign, the sun in a fire sign, so that could create a little bit of energy, a little more enthusiasm, and also a bit more optimism. Now, there are some non-lunar aspects which we need to point out. And at the beginning of a weekend, we have Mars trine Saturn. And at the end of a weekend, we have Venus trine Mars. Now, I will be talking about these two aspects at the end of the video because it just is going to be part of my general sort of analysis of the weekend, not just the weekend, but my specific focus in this video, because it's such a powerful weekend astrologically. There is a lot to talk about, but generally speaking, Mars trine Saturn is an aspect that could work in two ways. It sounds good, it sounds constructive, it sounds as if we can sort of focus our energy and structure things and get things done. But Mars and Saturn are a difficult pairing, and they are a pair of planets which can be quite malefic, and Uranus remains on the Mars-Saturn midpoint. I talked about Uranus on the Mars-Saturn midpoint yesterday when I was doing my video for Friday, but it's still around. And Uranus on the Mars-Saturn midpoint at worst can be about dramatic accidents, disasters. I mentioned the fact that the Fukushima nuclear accident, a very major nuclear accident, happened with Uranus aspecting the Mars-Saturn midpoint. Also the Windscale fire, the worst nuclear accident in Western Europe, I think, happened when Mars was when Uranus was aspecting the Mars-Saturn midpoint, and that was in 1957. So it could be that that things nuclear need to be watched out for. So if you're managing a nuclear power station over the weekend, make sure everything's in order, and if alarm bells start going, pay attention to them. But I'm sure there's not going to be a nuclear accident. It's something I actually used to do at the beginning of my, when I was beginning of my, if you like, career as an astrologer. I think it was because as I started getting into astrology in the mid-80s, the big event was Chernobyl. So I kind of got a little bit obsessed about Chernobyl, and I was always looking for nuclear disasters and trying to work out astrologically when it was going to happen. I did actually come up with a date when I thought it was going to be a nuclear disaster. It was in the mid-80s, and it didn't happen. But all that happened was that the Israelis bombed an Iraqi nuclear plant. Nothing was going on in the nuclear plant, but it kind of coincided. But I do have this nuclear obsession, so I don't think that there is going to be anything nuclear going on this weekend. But it's just interesting that Fukushima and the Windscale fire did coincide with that with nuclear accidents. And so we've got these two. Venus trine Mars, though, is a different energy. Venus trine Mars is an aspect that is very charismatic. It's about sex appeal. It's about desire. It's about people getting on with each other. And Venus and Mars, the two planets of respectively female and male sexuality, they're in trine. So there is an attractiveness there, and then that may say something about the overall atmosphere. There may be a certain sexual emphasis, maybe an overemphasis in certain things going on. But maybe that just says something about society being overly obsessed about sexuality. But still, we can't avoid that aspect. It is a trine, though, and trines are not as obvious as squares, oppositions, conjunctions. At least in my experience, they can be more subtle. So that's the weekend from the viewpoint of New York. This is set for midnight, middle of a weekend on April the 6th. If we set that chart for Sydney, Australia, the moon is earlier in the sign. And so if you're in Sydney, Australia, the moon is not going to move into Leo until pretty late on Sunday. And so you could probably see it as a moon in Cancer weekend, both Saturday and Sunday. And if you are in Australia, those lunar aspects, the moon making trine to Saturn, trine to Venus, conjunction to Mars, they are going to be important, and it could be quite a dynamic weekend, and it may be a weekend that's dynamism moves into Sunday. So if you're in the Americas, there is a sharp difference between Saturday and Sunday, and Saturday may be a more happening day than Sunday. If you're in Australia and New Zealand, I think the action goes through the whole weekend. And then there is the heliocentric picture, putting the sun at the center of the solar system, and there is an exact semi-sextile between Saturn and Chiron. Remember, heliocentric semi-sextile between Saturn and Chiron. They are exactly 30 degrees apart, and that aspect has been getting stronger as the week has progressed, and I'd see it just as obligation, really. That's one way of looking at it. There's an obligation to care. An alternative way of looking at it would be to say that we want to do something different, but Saturn is trying to stop us, or at least it feels that Saturn is trying to stop us. And so the message might be that if we want to be a maverick, we're going to have to take into account the constraints around us, but we mustn't be completely overwhelmed by them or use them as an excuse for doing nothing. There is something that has to be done, but we have to make sure that we do it in the right way. Additionally, we have got a quincunx between Mars and Pluto. There's Mars at 1 degree 49 Virgo and Pluto at 2 degrees 4 Aquarius. So this quincunx between Mars and Pluto can be about throwing one's weight around or trying to throw one's weight around. It's kind of got a similar message to that Chiron semi-sextile Saturn. We're trying to be a maverick. We're trying to do things differently. We're trying to care when no one else cares, and there are constraints, or there appear to be constraints. Likewise, with Mars semi-sextile Pluto, there are things we'd like to do. There are ways in which we want to assert ourselves, but we know that there are also things trying to hold us back. And with Pluto, of course, it's not like Saturn. It's more about our own fears, feeling, well, this is really heavy. This is too heavy for us. I don't think I want to go down this road. But there might be some obligation, but there also is a bit of a warning there, because Mars semi-sextile Pluto, if we go about things in the wrong way, we might unleash it, and we might unleash forces that we don't necessarily understand. So that's the general picture. And now I want to consider the weekend from the viewpoint of the 12 signs. So these are my forecasts for the 12 signs for the weekend of April the 5th and 6th, 2025. Aries. Aries, it's quite a mixed weekend. There is a lot going on. There's no doubt about that. And Mars, your ruler, is strongly configured. Don't forget, this weekend Mars makes a trine to Saturn, and it makes a trine to Venus. And I think there could be quite a difference between Saturday and Sunday, especially if you're in the Americas, Europe, Africa. With Saturday, the moon is moving through Cancer. And so the beginning of a weekend, you might find yourself being a little more defensive than usual. The moon is making a conjunction to Mars, and moon conjunct Mars often likes to look after itself and is quite wary of threats, or perceived threats. These threats might not be real, or they may be people just saying things they shouldn't be saying, doing things they shouldn't be doing, and you are quick to take offense, and you're quick to protect your interests, not just your physical interests, but maybe your ideological interests, what you believe in. And if you're a typical Aries, there are probably lots of things you believe in, not in an obsessive Taurean way, because you're not a Taurus, and there is a sort of a lightness to your beliefs, but they're still very real. And so, Aries, you are going to want to hold your ground, and you won't just look the other way if someone does something you don't approve of. So that's one way of looking at Saturday. And also Mars is making a trine to Saturn, and that actually can give you a great deal of focus. If you really want to focus your energy on something, you really can, and you can be taken seriously, and people will get out of your way. But there's no need to be in such a rush. Mars trine Saturn might slow you down a little bit, slow you down just enough so that your impact can be maximized. If you try to do everything at 1,000,000 miles an hour on Saturday, maybe Sunday as well, you won't be so successful. But if you just try to be focused, try to concentrate on the things that matter, that Mars trine Saturn may actually help you out. And indeed, with Mars trine Saturn, if you do try to take things too quickly, then you might quickly get frustrated, because some things have to be taken slowly, and you have to move towards your goals, step by step. though though Aries, do not underestimate your own power. At the moment, Aries, you have a lot of power. You're probably one of the most powerful of the 12 signs, both on Saturday and on Sunday. As you move into Sunday, things probably become a little bit lighter. The moon moves into Leo. Okay, if you're in Australia or New Zealand, the moon might not move into Leo until the end of Sunday, but in the end, moon will be in Leo. And so with the moon moving into Leo, it just makes things a little bit easier. The moon makes a trine to Neptune in Aries, and that's a softer influence, and there's not quite so much pressure. And also Venus is making a trine to Mars, and with the Venus trine Mars is exact all weekend, whether it's Saturday or Sunday, but it is absolutely exact on Sunday at a time when the moon is in Leo. And so that allows you to be yourself, not to have such a confrontational view, and you're probably going to be more relaxing company. People are going to like you, they're going to find you attractive, and you can get what you want in most cases just by using your charm, using your persuasiveness, just being a nice person, and everything should really happen. And as far as relationships are concerned, you could say that this weekend can be great. Okay, on Saturday, if you're not careful, you could fall out with people because you really are concerned to look after your own interests, and you could react strongly if you hear something or see something you don't like. But on Sunday, I do think you become calmer, and also you become a more exciting person because the moon is moving into Leo. And if you're an exciting person, you're also an attractive person. And so relationships by the end of the weekend should prosper, and whatever is possible, got to be realistic, but whatever is possible can happen if you give it the chance. Taurus, you are someone who at the moment, at least on Saturday, you've got a fair amount to say for yourself, and there are a few things you can't reasonably discuss, and you'll be able to sort of put a lot of energy into expressing your viewpoint, into listening to what other people have to say. I mean, it is active listening. You are going to be pretty dynamic. The moon is making a conjunction to Mars. The moon is also making a trine to Venus, and that's happening on Saturday. So you're going to be very present, and people are going to be aware of your presence, and you won't be too bothered about sort of moving from place to place. You don't have to restrict your field of operations to any one place. You can move around. I mean, you're not going to be moving around in an obsessive kind of way. I mean, it's probably a case, Taurus, that there are a few places, a few scenes that you're very familiar with, and you want to go from place to place. If you can do that, that would be good. Though, okay, you could say with Moon making a conjunction to Mars that short distance travel could be a problem if you're not careful. So if you are moving around, you don't take risks, don't be in a hurry. Give yourself plenty of time from getting from one place to another. But if you've got a lot of energy, if you've got surplus energy, don't throw that energy into your driving, for example. You focus more on the social side of things, because in a crowd, you can be very effective. You may not always feel effective. You may feel that you're holding back, someone else is holding back, but really you are being effective, and you're not naive about what's going on. You can see the way things are developing. You can be part of the crowd, but you can also observe the crowd. Okay, it may not be a crowd, it may be just a group of people, but you know that nothing lasts forever, and you're very aware of endings. I think you have been aware of endings over the last few days, and you have perhaps felt that it was time to be sort of, tying up a few loose ends. Especially Saturday, you've got first quarter moon, and with this first quarter moon, you've been watching things develop over the last week, and now you see that something has to give, and you're perhaps aware that some people are helpful, some people are not so helpful, and you're quite good at making an analysis of other people and what's really going on for them. And one reason for this is the conjunction between Venus and Saturn. That Venus-Saturn conjunction, I don't think it's exact until early next week. I think it's probably exact on Monday, is it? Let's just have a quick look. But that Venus conjunct Saturn is important, obviously, because Venus is your ruler. Yeah, that Venus conjunct Saturn it's exact on Monday, and you are feeling that, and you perhaps do feel that nothing lasts forever, but from a social point of view, it just may be about sort of making hay while the sun shines, and that might be what Saturday is about. And additionally, Venus is trine Mars, and so Venus trine Mars over the weekend, it's a good aspect for relationships. And if you want to get on with people, you can. And that Venus trine Mars means that Venus is you, Mars represents potentially another person, so it's an opportunity to make a clear connection with another person. For whatever reason that this relationship exists. It may be short term, it may be long term. It depends on the situation. Then, as you move into Sunday, there is a change because the moon changes sign. The moon moves out of Cancer into Leo at some stage on Sunday. For most of us, that's going to be early, by the early morning. It happens if you're in London at 5:34 in the morning on Sunday. If you're in Europe, continental Europe, that would be 6:34 a.m. So it does happen early, unless you're in Australia or New Zealand, in which case it happens late in the day on Sunday. But with the moon moving into Leo, things are going to settle down. So Sunday should be a quieter day, and a day when you maybe want to put up the drawbridge to an extent. You may feel that you're not quite as sociable as you used to be, and additionally, you're really starting to feel the influence maybe of that conjunction between Venus and Saturn. That does make you serious, and you can't be friends with everyone with Venus conjunct Saturn, and you do have to put yourself first, and you may become aware of the limitations of other people and the limitations of your circle of friends. Whatever those circles are like. I mean, they may not exist. I mean, you may not have any friends. I mean, not everyone can have friends. I don't think I've got many friends. I can probably count my friends. 2 friends. I don't have many friends. So with Venus conjunct Saturn, of course, I've got Taurus rising, so I am maybe to an extent talking to myself here. But Venus conjunct Saturn, it is serious, and you are aware of the restrictions around you. Some of those restrictions may be self-imposed, but that doesn't mean to say that they are wrong. Sometimes you have to have a disciplined front, and I'll be talking about that Venus-Saturn conjunction in more detail when I look at your horoscope for Monday. Gemini, you should perhaps regard Saturday as a continuation of Friday. I mean, I know that people like to enjoy the weekend, but you're a Gemini. You're not the kind of person that is going to be restricted by social norms. You can just see through it all. And one day should be regarded as the same as any other day. And so, don't feel that you necessarily have to make big changes because it's a Saturday. I just feel, Gemini, that there are things you need to do, would like to do, and so things like money could be important, and career, ambition, where you want to point yourself, pointing yourself towards the future, what tasks need to be achieved. And so if you can do that, then I think to a great extent you would be doing the right thing. And again, I'm particularly thinking about Saturday. I think that Sunday is a different day from Saturday, but Saturday there potentially is serious work to be done. And so if there's something you hadn't finished from Friday, then keep going on Saturday. I mean, even if you're not working, there's something you want to attend to. And this whole thing is about being in the place where you can make the most of everything. And if you want to make the most of things, you should be focusing on money and career and ambition and status and achievement. And you can recover a lot of ground, and you can look after your own interests, and you will potentially benefit from a trine between Mars and Saturn. Mars is in Cancer. Mars is in a sign that is very financially orientated from a Gemini perspective, and it's hitting Saturn, and that aspect gives you incredible self-discipline, and you know what is important, and you also understand that everything has a price, and that may be part of the fact that we have a first quarter moon. So the sun is in Aries, moon is in Cancer, but the two bodies are square each other. So the sun in Aries is quite a dynamic influence. All the things you'd like to do, all the people you'd like to meet, all the places you'd like to go to, and you're enjoying the sun in Aries. But then we've got that first quarter moon, and that's the first challenge. And that first challenge may be financial, thinking about the limits placed by, maybe how much money you've got in the bank. And if you're in if you're in the UK, it's the beginning of the tax season. Not the tax season. If you're in the UK, it's the beginning of the tax year, April the 6th. That may have some impact on you. It's been a long time since I've paid tax in the UK. Or if you are in the US, you've only got 6 days before April the 15th. Is it 6 days, April the 15th? You've got just over a week before April the 15th when taxes are supposed to be submitted, or unless you ask for an extension. So the financial side of things for Geminis could be quite important on Saturday. Sunday, things do change when the moon moves into Leo. And I think that things get a little bit easier when the moon moves into Leo. You find that you have more space and there are more things to do, and you might also be a little bit less self-obsessed with your own needs and your own concerns, and you can afford to be more relaxed, and also you're going to be more inspired, and you're going to lose some of that single-minded focus that could have been making you a slightly difficult person to be around. But with the moon in Leo, Leo and Gemini are two signs that get on well with each other, and so you can afford to sort of let your guard down a bit. Maybe doing some minor short distance traveling. You don't have to go miles and miles away, but that might be something you want to do with the moon in Leo. Moon trines Neptune, which is which is pleasant. It's relaxing, and the Sun makes a sextile to Jupiter, and that's probably an aspect I should have made more of when I did my introduction. I didn't actually mention it, which was a bit of an omission on my part. But the Sun is making a sextile to Jupiter on Sunday, and that's a Sun in Aries making a sextile to Jupiter in Gemini. So in fact, that really is a very positive force, and you may start to be aware that things can happen. You can make things happen, and you may be able to benefit from having a busier social life. And if not, well, you can start to align yourself with the future. And that's perhaps what you've been trying to do on and off ever since Jupiter went into Gemini last May. It hasn't always been easy, but with Sun sextile Jupiter, you might just get another chance, and you might come across something that makes you feel happy and enthusiastic, and you just want to really get on with it, and you're ready to sort of say goodbye to the past, to the complications of the past. And so do make the most of it. And that Sun sextile Jupiter, I would have said, is quite lucky. And so if you give something your best shot, then there's every chance that it works out for you. Cancer, Saturday is a day when the moon is indeed moving through your sign, still in Cancer. And while the moon moves through Cancer, it makes a lot of aspects. So I do think, Cancer, that Saturday is potentially going to be quite a busy day when there are lots of things to do, and there are lots of things you want to get your teeth into. It's also first quarter moon. I think I already talked about the first quarter moon when I was talking about your horoscope for Friday. But this first quarter moon, well, it's late depends on your time zone. Could be late Friday, could be Sunday. In fact, if you're in the Americas, it would have been Friday evening, the first quarter moon. But it's still a feature of Saturday, and with that first quarter moon, you are dynamic, and you realize what you need to do, and you realize what is missing, and you also know that it's not anyone's fault, or even if it is someone's fault, it's nothing they can do about it. The only person that can do anything about it is you. And that first quarter moon might actually give you a certain amount of responsibility. If something is wrong, it's down to you to make it happen. And if you want something, again, it's down to you. And so that first quarter moon I would regard as being pretty useful. And additionally, the moon is making a load of aspects. The moon is making a sextile to Uranus. It's making a conjunction to Mars. It's making a trine to Venus, trine to Mercury. So everything is happening. And if you want to make something happen, you don't have to put in a lot of force. It's just natural, and you don't have to make a fuss about it. You just do it, and it all comes together. faster than expected. And it may be that no one actually knows what you're doing, and it's quite subtle, but it might start as being subtle, but it is fast moving, and you just are quite possibly, the most energetic person around. But again, it doesn't seem as if you're being energetic. And also, Cancer, you can tune into things which are perhaps above and beyond your normal experience. You don't have to tie yourself to the past or to things that are boring. If you want to be interested and you want to get a different view, that's something you very much can. You very much can do it. Absolutely achievable, and so do be adventurous at least on Saturday, because you really have got opportunities here to see things which are new and different. And you don't get angry either, because the moon is making a conjunction to Mars, and that Moon-Mars conjunction, it is a dynamic aspect, and for sure you can assert yourself. But is it really necessary to assert yourself? Cancerians can be very good at getting angry and showing their annoyance, but it's not always necessary. And with Moon conjunct Mars, that might just be something that just motivates you to make things happen, and there's no need to take it out onto other people. And that perhaps underlines the point that it's about responsibility. It's about you recognizing that you are responsible for what happens. You don't have to rely on anyone else, and if other people are slacking off, that's not going to affect you, because you're the one that can make things happen. And then by the end of the weekend, the moon is changing sign. It's moving from Cancer into Leo, and with the moon moving out of Cancer, it's possible that things slow down a little. You perhaps have other priorities, and with the moon in Leo, as I always say, with the moon in Leo, there can be a financial dimension. The moon doesn't just move into Leo. It makes a trine to Neptune, and it makes an opposition to Pluto. So that moon opposition Pluto on Sunday may force you to consider some financial complication, or it may be some other complication. You just feel that someone's not being entirely honest with you, and you're not sure. You don't want to jump to conclusions, but it just may be a situation where you need to do some further research. Also on Sunday, by the way, the Sun is making a sextile to Jupiter, and that Sun sextile Jupiter, I think, should work quite well for you. Jupiter is a planet that does have a connection with Cancer, and that's because Jupiter is exalted in Cancer. And so the Sun in Aries sextile Jupiter may allow you to continue with the good work, and this time round to be doing it in a way that is very positive, and you're looking for new possibilities, and these possibilities are of a practical nature. So it might be that on Sunday, Cancer, you just want to prepare for the new week, and you've got lots of ideas about what you want to do next week, and this Sun sextile Jupiter, there's a good chance that it can facilitate them. Leo, from your perspective, possibly the most important aspect is a sextile aspect between the Sun and Jupiter. So, Jupiter is the planet of good fortune. The Sun is in Aries, where it's exalted, and so, that should work well for you. Of course, it's not just the fact that the Sun is in Aries. The Sun is your ruler, and you start to really benefit from the fact that the sun is exalted in Aries because of that sextile with Jupiter. And this is especially going to be the case on Sunday when that sun sextile Jupiter is exact, and also on Sunday the moon moves into Leo. So if you're planning the weekend, then I think there's a good chance that the action could be on Sunday rather than Saturday. Now, that's not what I'm telling everyone. I think for most people it's Saturday where the action is happening. But I do think for you should be concentrating on Sunday. On Saturday, you just may not feel that you're entirely in the mood. Things may still feel that they're rather complicated, and there are things to work out. Yeah, you can see that other people are doing lots of different things, and you can see that you're living in an active world, but will you want to be part of it on Saturday? I think the answer is quite possibly no, and instead you might just want to bide your time. But then the moon moves into Leo. The moon moves into Leo actually late on Saturday if you're on the west coast of the US. If you're in California or Oregon, then that sun would move into Leo, I think, at when would that be? I think 9:34 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. I think that's when it would happen. But if is that right? 5. Yeah, I think that's 9:34 p.m. Standard Time. But if you're on the East Coast, it would be at 0:34 in the morning on Sunday. So Sunday in general, the moon moving through Leo. Wherever you are, except Asia, Australasia, it's a different matter because the moon moves into Leo much later in the day. But yeah, for most of us, or for most Leos, Sunday is going to be a day when you just feel different, when you feel that things are happening, and you're able to imagine more, because when the sun moves into Leo, it makes a trine to Neptune, in Aries. Sorry, did I say the sun? Yeah, when the moon moves into Leo, it makes a trine to Neptune in Aries, and suddenly you become aware of possibilities. That those possibilities might seem vague, but as you move through Sunday, as the sun makes that sextile to Jupiter, you start to see what is possible, and you can really start to enjoy yourself, and be yourself, and get the attention and the appreciation that you deserve. And because of that, ideally you shouldn't spend Sunday alone. Try to be with people. Try to find people who are on your wavelength, because that could lead to a fun time. And I do think that the weekend for you, Leo, can end on a satisfactory note. Virgo, the weekend starts with the moon moving through Cancer, and while the moon is moving through Cancer, you're going to be feeling quite good about yourself, and I think that you'll have marked social skills with the moon here, and that's because the moon is making a lot of great aspects in Cancer. It's making, in particular, it's making trine aspects to Venus and Mercury. So those trines involving the moon and Venus and Mercury are going to allow you to communicate very well with lots of different people, and additionally you'll just be good at making friends if need be. Of course, not everyone is in the mood for making friends, and It's not something that most people or many people want to do. But if you need to make friends or you would like to make friends, I think that that is something that you very much can do. And additionally, Virgo, when you're with people, even if it's just with one person, you have the capacity to make things happen, and you can make things happen in your own way. It's not that you have to be exciting or spontaneous. You can just address yourself to the issue at hand. How can you make something happen? What are the steps that are required? And it may just be your presence makes the difference. And people are going to, they're going to like having you around. And so, don't feel that you're not being appreciated, because you very much are being appreciated. And, Mercury continues to be pretty close to the North Node, and that Mercury North Node conjunction is in Pisces. And additionally, if you look at Mercury, it's on the Venus North Node midpoint. You can see that by eye. Mercury is making a conjunction to Venus. Mercury is making a conjunction to the North Node, so a very close conjunction. So Mercury on the Venus Node midpoint just gives you amazing social skills if you try. And again, I must emphasize, social skills does not mean being super extroverted. That's not just what having social skills is about. It's about just understanding the situation and just acting in an appropriate way. And and what more can anyone ask for? So do try to have an active Saturday, if at all possible. As you move into Sunday, things do change. I do think that things will slow down, and you may feel that you're not quite in the mood for having to deal with other people and their problems. And additionally, you might become aware of a sextile between the Sun and Jupiter. So that Sun sextile Jupiter could have an impact on your social life, but it will probably narrow it down. So on Saturday, you might have had the ability to deal with lots of different people. By Sunday, with that Sun sextile Jupiter, you might just want to focus on one person, and or two people. And you'll just want to sort of hone things down to the things and people that are important, that are productive, and that make you feel good about yourself. And that Sun sextile Jupiter does allow you to have meaningful contacts with other people, but not in a crazy way anymore. I mean, Saturday could be a fairly crazy day. I don't think Sunday is going to be a crazy day. I think you're going to want to take things at a slower pace and give things more time. And really on Sunday, the emphasis is going to be on quality rather than quantity. You want the best of everything, you want the best of other people, and you don't want to have to bother about the dross. Libra, Venus continues to move closer and closer to Saturn, and this conjunction between Venus and Saturn is exact on Monday. So it's not quite there, but at this stage, I think it is becoming really quite strong, and you do feel that there is a need for structure, and you feel that you maybe haven't got quite as much energy as you used to have, and so you can't do everything, and you have to look after your own interests, and also you have to look after your own health with Venus conjunct Saturn. I'm not trying to make you scared or anything. I'm not saying anything that is of medical significance, but all of us could be healthier, And with Venus conjunct Saturn, you might want to, take active steps to, remove yourself from anything that you regard as being undermining, whether that's people, situations, or things you're consuming. Just, put yourself first, and that should be your priority for the weekend. Now, while Venus is making a conjunction to Saturn, it is also making a trine to Mars. And this Venus trine Mars could well be about another person, could be about relationships, someone you have a lot of contact with, and you may have your reservations, but that contact could turn out to be useful and helpful and may even be healthy, provided it's a contact with the right person. So ask yourself, when you're looking at the weekend, which person are you likely to be spending the most time with? And is this person good for you? They probably are good for you because Venus is trine Mars. And additionally, the right person can be very motivating, because Mars is a dynamic planet, and it's in Cancer, high profile sign in your chart. So if you feel a little bit listless and you don't quite know where you're going, it could be the input from one particular person could really make all the difference. And so give the right person a chance, but don't give everyone a chance. That is not a good idea. You need to be looking after yourself, and you don't want a cluttered weekend, and you certainly don't want a cluttered Saturday. I know that the Venus-Saturn conjunction is exact on Monday, but I think on Saturday you need to make a special effort to make sure that everything happens on your terms. Also, there is a conjunction between the Moon and Mars. And Moon actually makes a conjunction to Mars, and it makes a trine to Venus. And it brings together Venus and Mercury, because Venus might be conjunct Saturn, but it's also conjunct Mercury. And this is perhaps a reminder, Libra, that actually you're very clever, and you've got all sorts of ideas that you would like to put into action. And this trine involving the Moon and Mars and Venus and Mercury is really going to give you an opportunity, even though it's a Saturday. Maybe it's just about writing something down, or getting the support and the enthusiasm you need from another person. So a lot of things can come together on Saturday. So as I'm actually telling quite a lot of people, don't slack off just because it's a weekend. I think Saturday really could be quite useful. Sunday, slightly different, because the Moon is moving into Leo. So with the Moon moving into Leo, you might lose some of your focus, but that might be a good thing. You can perhaps have a chance to relax a little, especially when you're not having to worry about other people. Remember that Venus conjunct Saturn. That Venus conjunct Saturn does mean that you need a certain amount of structure. You don't want to have the wrong people bothering you or getting in your way, exhausting you. So if everything is done on your terms, with Moon moving into Leo, and that moon trine Neptune could just help you be yourself. And there's also that Sun sextile Jupiter, and that Sun sextile Jupiter may link back to relationships. The right person can really make you feel good about yourself, but the wrong people, well, that's absolutely what you don't even want to consider. So Libra, this weekend, look after yourself. try to bear in mind that there are active steps you can take to make yourself healthier, and getting the social combinations right could be very important. And you don't want to have too many people around you, because that would just be counterproductive. Scorpio, Mars is a planet which continues to be important. I talked about Mars yesterday when I was talking about Friday, but as I think I said on Friday, that Saturday is a continuation of Friday. I know Friday is a working day, Saturday is a weekend, but these are arbitrary distinctions. I think that you should see Saturday as a continuation of Friday, and Mars does continue to be emphasized. Mars is making a trine to Saturn on Saturday, and also the Moon is making a conjunction to Mars, and the Moon is making a trine to Venus, by the way. So, do think about what your Mars is. I mean, Mars is your ruler. Pluto does not rule Scorpio. Pluto might have an association with Scorpio, but your ruler is Mars, and so it's a time when when you can stand out, and you can also really streamline yourself. So Cancer, if you have plans or ideas, some of these plans and ideas might be far-fetched, at least they might seem to be far-fetched, but with Mars trine Saturn, you can have another look at what you're trying to achieve and actually work out a way of actually making it possible. And it's taking things which are far-flung, otherworldly, perhaps rather exotic, and bringing them down to earth and making them part of who you are, and just making them part of your lifestyle, part of all the whole thing which relates to what makes you feel good about yourself. And you want to feel good about yourself, and if something seems appealing in theory, why not make it appealing in practice, and bring it in, own it, possess it. Scorpios quite like possessing things, don't they? And while this is happening, there is something about you that is very appealing, and in a social sense, you could actually be quite possessive. You may want to own people. I don't think I want to suggest that in a negative way, but if you like someone, you want them to be part of your life. I mean, that's not to say you have to be in a relationship with them or live with them. They can still be part of your life, someone you associate with on a regular levels, on a regular basis, and you can share their experiences and see what they've got to say about the world, and benefit from it. And this Venus trine Mars that we've got today, is what we've got on. So it's over the weekend, but you've been feeling it for the last few days, and it will run into next week as well. That Venus trine Mars, that does make you someone who is very appealing, and people are going to be drawn in. And once people get drawn into Scorpio's web, it may not be so easy to leave. But that's up to you. You have to decide what you want from other people, and you can certainly be very demanding, and don't underestimate your power, Scorpio. You have a lot of power at the moment, and that power could be used for good, and I suppose it could be used for bad as well. And heliocentrically, Mars is also doing stuff. Heliocentrically, Mars is quincunx Pluto, so it's a similar message. You want to be in control, and I think that is going to be quite important to you, and it can be done in a very sort of easygoing way. You really don't have to push it. And over the course of a weekend, the moon moves through late Cancer. Moon then moves into Leo, and so with the moon moving into Leo, moon moving into a fire sign, that's not bad either. It provides a slightly different emphasis, and with the moon moving into Leo, you may feel that you want to bring things together. You've had lots of experiences, lots of ideas, thoughts, concepts, and that's all very well, but you want to actually see some results with moon moving through Leo, and that may say something about what you are trying to achieve, and you may decide that you actually want something very specific, and you may be starting to think about how you can actually take concrete steps to actually get it. And I think you can be successful, if not on Sunday, then the beginning of next week. And additionally, the sun is making a sextile to Jupiter, and that sun sextile Jupiter allows you to sort of privately work on something that is important to you. And this is especially on Sunday. You work on it, it's important to you, you know what you want, and you have the discipline and also the enthusiasm to be able to see it through. By the way, with this Venus trine Mars, must emphasize it can be a great weekend for relationships. So, whatever you want from people. I mean, I've already said that it should be okay because you've got a lot of power, but I just need to say it one more time. Venus trine Mars for Scorpios, it's a great aspect for relationships. And this Venus trine Mars, it's in water signs. So you've got Venus in Cancer. Sorry, you've got Venus. Let's say it again. Venus in Pisces, and you've got Mars in Cancer. So the missing element is Scorpio. So that Venus trine Mars has a direct impact on your sign, and I really should emphasize that you are someone who has got a considerable amount of charm at the moment, and this can certainly help in terms of relationships and whatever kind of relationships you want to involve yourself, and existing relationships should in the end work out very well, or at least beyond your expectations. Sagittarius, with the moon moving through Cancer. Moon is moving through Cancer throughout Saturday. Then you may feel that things are remaining rather complicated. You're not going to take things for granted, and you're not going to want to oversimplify things. You have to be serious. And Sagittarius, you know that is the right approach. And there are temptations to do things differently, to just try to pretend that everything is easy, but you're not going to fall for those temptations. You just know that things have to be done in a particular way, and you need to wait until you are ready. So that means that if you are being pressurized to do something, particularly on Saturday, you probably should just hold back. And if there are things that you really want to do, then do them on Sunday rather than Saturday, because I do think that for you, Sunday is probably going to be a better day than Saturday. Saturday just strikes me as a day where you regard things as too complicated, and if you were to socialize on Saturday, you probably wouldn't have a good time. You'd kind of feel that you'd rather be somewhere else, unless we're talking about socializing which is taking place on a very safe level, when you're on familiar ground, when you're surrounded by familiar people. And on Sunday, though, things do change, because the moon moves into Leo. And, moon moves into Leo, it's in a fire sign. And so with the moon in a fellow fire sign, that just gives you a lift. You're feeling better, and you're feeling that things aren't quite so intense. You can afford to relax. And additionally, the sun is making a sextile to Jupiter, and that sun sextile Jupiter, that is a great aspect. Jupiter's your ruler. The sun is in Aries, in its exaltation, making a sextile to Jupiter. So that means that you're going to find probably that the world is going to be more responsive to you. The world is going to understand you. And, before you may have felt that you were just a bit out on a limb, but on Sunday things are coming together. Okay, it might be late on Sunday if you're in Australia or New Zealand, but it's still there. And so if you want to do stuff this weekend, if you want to meet people, if you want to enjoy yourself, then try, if possible, to focus your energies on Sunday rather than Saturday. And on Sunday, also, we've got Venus trine Mars. Venus trine Mars is an aspect that is going to make you attractive. It's going to make everyone attractive in their own way. And it's not just something that focuses on particular signs, this Venus trine Mars. But it's like, even though you might be trying your hardest to be sociable on Saturday, you'll still give the impression that you're hiding something, that you've got something to offer. And that might mean that Sagittarius on Sunday, there could be something that's quite alluring about you. I mean, you'll be alluring in your own way on Saturday, but I don't know if you'll be able to benefit from it. So Sunday, Sunday does Sunday certainly looks like a good day, and where you can really make the most of people. And also, you should be able to enjoy yourself on Sunday. Certainly enjoy yourself a lot more easily than on Saturday. And over the weekend, again, especially on Sunday, there's a possibility that things happen in relationships, or your contacts with other people. They don't have to be face-to-face contacts. They could be online contacts. Something happens which is a little bit of a surprise. You weren't expecting it, and it is an opportunity. At first you might not be sure what's going on, but there might be something you can take advantage of, a meeting or a contact that you can take advantage of. So be on the lookout for that. Capricorn, Saturday and Sunday could be different days. I mean, that's obvious. Obviously, Saturday and Sunday are different days. But, on Saturday, the moon is moving through Cancer. On Sunday, the moon is moving through Leo. Or rather, on Sunday, the moon starts moving into Leo. If you're in Australia or New Zealand, it's not until quite late on Sunday that the moon moves into Leo. If you're in Europe, if you're in Europe, Africa, Americas, then by the early morning on Sunday, the moon will be in Leo. But with the moon in Leo, you might feel a little bit separate. You might value your own space, and so, at least from a social perspective, the emphasis should probably be on Saturday rather than Sunday while the moon is in Cancer. And, while the moon is in Cancer, there are things going on socially, and you can't avoid other people, or you shouldn't avoid other people, because other people are likely to have an influence on you. And if you try to go it alone on Saturday, it might be difficult, because you've just always just got to consider what other people are saying, what other people are doing, and maybe it's just a question of making yourself available. You don't have to give over all your time to other people. Maybe most of your time you can spend it on your own if you want to spend your time on your own. But you do have to be there. And okay, you don't have to be anywhere. Of course, I should say that. But on Saturday, for example, we see a trine between Moon and Saturn. In fact, we see a trine between Mars and Saturn as well. But that Moon-Saturn trine does create good communications between you and another person. The communication might be light. It's not necessarily the case that anything serious or intense gets discussed, but if you need to talk about something, then Saturday would be a good time to do it, or rather, it's more likely that someone wants to talk to you about something. You have your own influence, and you shouldn't disregard that influence. People like you, or at the very least, people regard you as being important, and that is a role that you have to accept. And when we looked at the heliocentric picture, we saw that Saturn was making a semi-sextile to Chiron, again heliocentrically, not geocentrically, and that semi-sextile between Saturn and Chiron may give you a certain obligation. You may feel that you have to do something, that is about helping another person, that someone needs your advice or your assistance, and you can provide it. You don't completely want to provide it, but if you just made the effort, you would be making, I think, quite a big difference. And also, that Moon trine Saturn on Saturday, that is the classic relationship aspect for Capricorns, and there are just good contacts there, which allow you and another person to have a good understanding of each other. But again, it doesn't have to be intense. Just one conversation can be very powerful and can just move things along, and it can be powerful without you having to reveal anything, without you having to get too emotional. So that's something that you can certainly be doing on Saturday. And additionally, Mars trine Saturn. Mars trine Saturn, you could say, is the main aspect of the weekend. And Mars trine Saturn is about you having a lot of energy and a lot of power, and you being really strengthened by your environment. So that actually might be a good reason not to be alone, especially on Saturday, because when there are things going on around you, when there are people around you, you can actually pick up on their strength, pick up on their energy, and it will actually make you stronger. It doesn't sound realistic. You're a sensible, reserved Capricorn. You probably don't really think that is something that is possible, but it actually can happen. And then Sunday, the moon does move into Leo, and when the moon moves into Leo, Capricorn, I think that it does create a change. You feel that things have to be worked out, and I also think you'll lose some of that sense of obligation. I think that you can actually start to do things on your own, in your own way, and there may be things you just need to consider. When the moon moves into Leo, it straight away makes a trine to Neptune. Neptune has just gone into Aries very recently, and so on Sunday you're going to be feeling a little more distanced, and not fully connected with the material world. And that's a strange thing to say for a Capricorn, because Capricorn is a very down-to-earth, material-based sign. But with that moon trine Neptune, there's something that's a little bit floaty about that moon trine Neptune. And maybe that's what you need. You need to get that distance and to get that emotional distance. And I think that's perhaps how you should see Sunday. And so perhaps you should regard the weekend as being a weekend of two halves, and that first half, when the moon is in Cancer, is going to probably be more active when there's more obligation. But on Sunday, you can really start to enjoy the weekend just as a weekend where there's nothing you have to do. Aquarius. Saturday is possibly going to be quite an active day, but not necessarily an active day that you will always enjoy. Saturday just could be rather tedious. You can't entirely be yourself. There are things that require your attention, and you don't want to give these things your attention, but you kind of have to. It's at the very least a sense of obligation, but it just may be that there are boring things that have to be done, and they can't be done at a later stage, and you have to listen to what you're being told, and you have to pay attention to everything, because if you miss something, then you might have to deal with the consequences at a later stage. So I'm afraid on Saturday, Aquarius, you do have to be fairly alert, and you also have to give things as much energy as you can. You do have a lot of energy. I mean, you don't feel probably that you have a lot of energy, but once you start doing something, you actually realize you can just keep going. And one reason for that might be the fact that Mars is making a trine to Saturn. So Saturn's your ruler, so Mars gives you energy, and you can keep going. It's not the kind of energy that is explosive. And if you take things too quickly, then you could run out of steam. But if you take things slowly, you take every challenge, one step at a time. You move forward, step by step. You will have enough energy to get yourself through the day. And I know that's not really what you wanted to hear. You wanted to hear that there was going to be some excitement. Yeah, there could be excitement, but just maybe not the kind of excitement you really wanted. And there may be things that annoy you. There may be things that annoy other people. There may be things that have to be discussed and even argued about. We shouldn't forget that there is a conjunction between the moon and Mars. So the moon makes a conjunction to Mars, and the moon is also making a trine to Saturn, and it may be obvious that there is a difference of opinion, and that you have to stand up for yourself, but in such a way that is reasonable. You can be reasonable. You're an Aquarius. You're not going to go crazy crazy on Saturday, and you have to show some restraint, and you can show some restraint. Mars trine Saturn that we have, that is about power and energy, but it's also about restraining that power and perhaps harnessing it so that you can actually achieve whatever it is you want to achieve. So don't allow yourself to get too sort of irritated on Saturday, and at the same time do as far as possible look after your own interests. And I think that you would undermine yourself if you were to take things too quickly or if you were to get angry, anger is not going to work for you. I think anger would really be very counterproductive. Then the moon changes sign, and it changes sign at 5:34 in the morning, London time. So that means that it's actually changing sign. London time on Sunday. That means it's actually changing sign late on Saturday if you're on the Pacific if you're on Pacific Standard Time. That would be at 9:34 p.m. on Saturday. So that moon sign change, moon moving into Leo, is probably going to be a bit of a relief. The pressure will reduce, and you're going to feel more comfortable. And when the moon moves into Leo, it makes a trine to Neptune, and that moon trine Neptune is going to just make it easier for you to relax. And as far as other people are concerned, they won't pressurize you so much, and you're still going to be aware of your social environment, but it just won't be such a problem. And additionally, Sun is sextile Jupiter on Sunday, and that Sun sextile Jupiter, it's been forming over the last few days, but on Sunday it becomes exact. And with Sun sextile Jupiter, you may get a chance to see certain people in a more positive light. Someone who you thought was not helpful, was just a drain on your resources. With Sun sextile Jupiter, you may actually see them in a new way, and people are probably in general going to treat you better on Sunday compared to Saturday. I'm sorry to be a little bit negative, but Sunday is a better day than Saturday, and that is a positive thing to say, isn't it? Pisces, there's quite a lot of stuff in water signs. At least on Saturday, there's a lot of stuff in water signs. We've got 5 planets in water signs: Saturn, Venus, Mercury, Moon, Mars. And as a Pisces, that is something you appreciate. And with the moon in Cancer, Pisces, you have the opportunity to have a fun and productive Saturday when you're going to have a fair amount of freedom. And if you want to do something, I don't think you'll have any problems being able to do it. And if you're able to enjoy it, so much the better. Though you're not going to be lazy, and you're unlikely to make mistakes. And that's because you're actually going to have quite good attention to detail. And the reason you might have a good attention to detail is because there is a trine aspect between Mars and Saturn. So that Mars represents all the things you want to do, all the things you're going to be putting your energy into, but it's trine Saturn. So you're able to control your own energy and direct it into the right places, and that does require a certain sense of detail. And additionally, we have got Venus again in Pisces making a trine to Mars. So Venus trine Mars, that's an aspect I've been talking about quite a lot today. In fact, I've been talking about it quite a lot over the last few days. Venus trine Mars is an aspect that is about relationships. It's about attractiveness and charm and charisma, all those kind of words. And it's very much part of you, and it's part of the way you express yourself. And so you can come over as being an attractive and charming person, wherever you are. And people are going to like you, and they're going to find you interesting, and in many cases they're going to want to know you better. So from a social and relationship perspective, I do think that the weekend could be very good, and I think that Saturday in particular could be very useful. Though we shouldn't forget about Sunday. Sunday is different because on Sunday the moon moves out of Cancer into Leo. And so, in one sense, the moon moving out of Leo is going to slow things down a little. And your sense of detail is probably going to, which is actually quite good at the moment, is going to be maybe a little more intense. And because you're more concerned about detail, you might lose some of your spontaneity. So you're going to be more spontaneous on Saturday than on Sunday. As you move into Sunday, you realize, or you think you realize, that things have to be done in a way that is more painstaking. You're going to think of, if you get it wrong, there could be consequences, and so you're going to want to get it right. But if you're trying too hard to get it right, that might mean that you're not enjoying yourself so much, but really that can't be helped. Though on Sunday, there is an exact Sun sextile Jupiter, and Jupiter is, of course, your ruler. And so Sun sextile Jupiter might indicate that you feel that some of your hard work and attention to detail is paying off. You may notice things which you can benefit from, and these things can make you feel more comfortable and more secure, and they could well have a financial dimension. So on Sunday, don't ignore money, don't ignore your financial needs, and if there's money you want or money you're looking for with that Sun sextile Jupiter, you might find a way of getting it, or at least getting closer to actually, whatever it is that you're looking for. So on Sunday, if possible, with that Sun sextile Jupiter, do think about money, and you will have a certain sense of detail, which I think can help you, and so you can really sort of move things along. And this Sun sextile Jupiter, it might be exact on Sunday, but it continues, and you should be able to experience its benefits early next week. So perhaps you need to think about early next week what you're doing on Monday and Tuesday, and what you can do to do something useful, what you can do to do something useful of a financial nature. That's something that can happen. So that's it for the weekend, Pisces. It's not going to be necessarily a super exciting weekend, but I do think that that there is a lot happening on Saturday. That should be fairly fun, even if it's not massively fun. And then Sunday strikes me as potentially being quite a useful day, and where your attention to detail could serve you very well. And those are my forecasts for the 12 signs, and it's now time to look at the I Ching. So I ask the question, what is the weekend going to be like for those watching the I Ching section of this video? And the first hexagram I got was illness, 18. Now, this hexagram in the Wilhelm translation is described as work on what has been spoilt, which is a bit of a mouthful, but it's kind of the same principle. Illness doesn't mean you're going to get sick, but it does indicate that over the weekend something is not entirely right, and we need to do something to make it better, against that idea of working on what has been spoilt. So if I Ching is talking about an illness, it's talking about an illness that is curable. We're not talking about anything that is just going to last forever. It could be feeling under the weather. It may say something about how you feel over the weekend, but I don't want to create any self-fulfilling prophecies here, and I don't want to create any sort of psychosomatic mischief here with this hexagram illness. It should be seen in a symbolic way, and with hexagram 18, the I Ching is really concentrating on what has gone wrong in the past and how we can fix it in the present. Indeed, on whether we should be fixing it in the present. And we have two moving lines. We have the second moving line and the fifth moving line. And the I Ching with the second moving line is talking about putting right what has been spoilt by the mother. And the fifth moving line, the fifth line moving, is putting right what has been spoilt by the father. I mean, these are symbolic concepts, so it's not necessarily literally your mother. But with the second line, one view of the second line is that we're talking about mistakes have been made which have fundamentally been about weakness. People haven't shown enough strength in the past, and they've allowed things to stagnate. And now we have to work out, what do we do about it? And one view is that we can't be too tough in terms of putting right these mistakes made in the past, perhaps by the mother, but whatever it is. I mean, I think the mother is a symbol of passivity here. And so that would be the mistakes of passivity. So if one has been too passive, one hasn't been strong enough, then what does one do now? Well, one isn't in too much of a hurry to fix the problem. One certainly doesn't use too much energy to fix the problem, because again, it's a fairly passive line, this second line moving. And there is in fact a view that if something is wrong, we shouldn't necessarily fix it ourselves. We should get someone else to fix it. And one interpretation of this second line, if you take a completely hierarchical perspective, then it's saying that don't treat your mother if your mother is sick. Let your sisters treat your mother. That's a sort of very gendered way of looking at it. But if we sort of translate that, one might say, well, this is a problem that for one reason or another you shouldn't be trying to fix. Maybe you've got better things to do. You've got your own work to do, and you should let someone else deal with it. And so that might be the right approach. And then the fifth line is about the sins of the father. Perhaps not necessarily the sins of the father, the mistakes of the father. And so that's something we sort out, and we're more active in sorting it out. And it's this time round, perhaps later in the weekend, we have to be more concentrated on making sure that these mistakes are rooted out. And it may actually be in the end that some very thorough reform is required to remove the corruption from the past. And in this way, we can actually get recognized. We may not be recognized straight away, but we're storing up recognition. So we do something and we do it well. And at first we don't get recognized, but in the end we will be. So whatever efforts we put into removing this corruption from the past, we'll be helping ourselves in the long run, and people will remember it. So this hexagram, illness or working on what has been spoilt, however you want to see it, does move. So we go a long way towards resolving the issue, and this takes us to a second hexagram, which is hexagram 53. So having dealt with the problem, we can move to 53, development, and we can start making progress. It's it's not fast progress, but it's solid progress, and gradually, we can make the situation better for ourselves and for other people, and we will be recognized. But we mustn't be in a rush. Slowly does it, and whatever the situation is, at the beginning, I talked about illness. Don't panic with illness. It's something that can be cured. It is cured, and by the end of the weekend, we're making good progress. Slow progress, but it's good progress nonetheless. And now I want to look at the astrology, and I don't necessarily have a specific topic I want to talk about, but I do want to make it clear that it is quite a busy weekend, and there is a first quarter moon. So we had the new moon on, I think it was March the 29th. I think the moon was at 9 degrees Aries, wasn't it? And so just over a week later, around a week later, we have the first quarter moon. So here is the chart for the first quarter moon. So you can see that the first quarter moon London time happens on Saturday morning at 3:15 a.m. So that means that the first quarter moon actually, if you're in the Americas, happens on Friday. And here is the first quarter moon. So the moon is at 1533 Cancer, and the sun is at 1533 Aries. So by definition, the sun and the moon are going to be exactly square. And so by looking at this first quarter moon, this might say something about the week ahead, perhaps. And we already know that this weekend we've got a lot of action. We've got Mars trine Saturn. Now this is important because Mars is trine Saturn. I mean, the exact time of Mars trine Saturn is at, London time is at 2:08 a.m. and at the first quarter moon is at 3:15 London time. So the first quarter moon is only separated from the Mars trine Saturn by just over an hour. And I mean, don't worry about the time. That's the London time. Whether it's it'll be earlier if it's in the Americas, later if you're in Australia or New Zealand. But don't worry too much about that exact time. The point is, first quarter moon is making that Mars trine Saturn even more powerful than it is. And I do think, over the weekend, for better or for worse, that Mars trine Saturn is just going to be very much part of what's going on, and it may continue for the whole week. So if you take the view that a new moon lasts for a month, or a full moon maybe lasts for 2 weeks. I mean, it depends whether it's an eclipse or how powerful it is. But certainly it would be reasonable to expect the influence of a first quarter moon to last for a week until the next lunation, which would be the full moon. And Mars Saturn, on a personal level, this may mean that we can really discipline ourselves. We can really, make things happen, and we can really concentrate on what is important and have a lot of focus. But Mars trine Saturn is not always something that is fortunate, because Mars and Saturn are a very difficult pairing. And the problem with this Mars Saturn trine is that it's got Uranus on the midpoint. And in my last video I talked about Uranus on the Mars Saturn midpoint. It is difficult, and it can be connected with accidents and disasters and real frustrations. And I just think it is worrying that it's so close at the time of this first quarter moon, and the first quarter moon is really bringing it together. It's making it happen, and we already know, because we've been watching the news, what's happening in the world. Whether it's Ukraine, whether it's the economy, whether it's Gaza, it can certainly have an influence. And so, looking at this first quarter moon, I'm not comfortable with it, and I think this first quarter moon, could be a problem. And one thing about this first quarter moon is, if you look at the midpoints of the first quarter moon. Now these midpoints may not be immediately obvious, but if I look at the midpoints, this first quarter moon is very close to being semi-square, sesquiquadrate the Pluto node midpoint. It's also very close to the Mercury-Pluto midpoint. So let me just show you what I mean with the 90-degree dial of this first quarter moon. So because it's a 90-degree dial, the sun and the moon are shown in the same place, because a square is shown as a conjunction on the first quarter moon. So if we look at the planets which have a symmetry with this, you can see that this first quarter moon is on the Pluto node midpoint. It's also on the Pluto-Mercury midpoint, the Mercury-Pluto midpoint, and additionally it's tied up with Vulcan, so it's on the Vulcan node midpoint. Vulcanus. Vulcanus is sort of the planet of volcanoes. That's a Vulcan. He's in Greek mythology, he's the blacksmith of the gods, but I don't think I want to talk too much about that. But the point about the Pluto node midpoint is that Reinhold Ebertin said about the Pluto node midpoint, he said that it can be about the tragic destiny of a large group of people. And that may be something about the world in which we're living. And some of us may be aware of that tragic destiny. A lot of people are suffering. That might be the imagery we get of the new moon on the Pluto node midpoint. I mean, let's just remind us of what Ebertin says about the Pluto node midpoint. So Pluto on he says Pluto on a dragon's head, as he puts it, the common destiny of a large group of people, and the common destiny of a large mass of people, and the negative manifestation would be that a common and tragic destiny shared with other people. And so that may be something we're aware of, or it may just be about the ruthlessness. I mean, Ebertin talks about ruthlessness as well with the sun and the moon, or particularly the sun, I think, on the Pluto node midpoint. So I think that it is a difficult lunation. And I think it's also made difficult by what is happening at the time of this lunar. Because when I say it's a lunation, it's a pretty minor lunation. It's a first quarter moon, and so at the time of this first quarter moon, we've got that Venus, we've got that Mars Saturn trine with Uranus on the T. So that may be a problem. So who is going to be impacted by this aspect? I mean, I looked at a few people who have this. Which aspect am I talking about, by the way? Well, I'm primarily focused still with Uranus. So going back to this lunation, it's not so much the degree of a lunation that matters. It's what is happening at the time of this lunation. And what we've got here is Uranus on the Mars-Saturn midpoint. Uranus is the focus of that Mars-Saturn trine. And so one might then ask, who might be influenced by it? What countries are going to feel Uranus hitting it, or what organizations? The European Union is. I haven't talked about the European Union's chart for some time. So the European Union has an absolutely horrific chart, by the way. If we take November the 1st, 1993, when the Treaty of Maastricht came into force. And the reason that I regard the European Union as having a horrific chart is its stuff in fixed signs. So European Union has a Mars-Pluto conjunction in Scorpio, and it's got the Moon opposition that Mars-Pluto conjunction in Scorpio, and Saturn is on the T. And when the Treaty of Maastricht came into force, you may have seen the European Union have a transition, because it developed a new chart, and in the end a new identity. And you could say that November the 1st, 1993 sort of foreshadowed Europe's expansion, and it became a much more totalitarian entity. And I don't think that totalitarianism existed so much before the Maastricht Treaty. It was a fairly benign organization, but after Maastricht, it no longer was a benign organization. And you can see the unpleasantness of the European Union with this aspect. It is something. It is totalitarian, and I think that we're starting to see this really work out over the last couple of years. Europe is about imposing its will on its members, and you have sort of unelected bureaucrats running Europe and having an ideology which they are trying to impose on its members. And we're also seeing interference in the political processes. So you have, look at what's happened in Romania, and where the president wins the first round, and then the elections get cancelled, and Romania is supposed to be a member of the European Union. Or in France, it's true that Marine Le Pen was responsible for she was guilty of embezzling the European Union, because she was using European funds to support, to basically help with the running of her party. But at the same time, this is something that probably a lot of people in Europe are doing, but she's got hit. She's taken the fallout for it, but it's being used as a pretext for removing her from public office, as a way of manipulating the political process in France. And again, we'll look at what's happening in Germany with increasing restrictions on freedom of speech. Now, these are things that are happening on the national arena, but the European Union is the overarching organization here, and it does seem to be having an influence. And here is its chart, and the European Union gives me the impression of an organization that is not going to bend, it's only going to break. It has a complete inflexibility to it with this chart. And Uranus at 25 Taurus is 25 Taurus is right now conjunct the EU's moon, and it's opposition the EU's Mars and Pluto. And remember, this Uranus is especially strong at the moment because right now it's on the Mars-Saturn midpoint. So the transiting Mars-Saturn midpoint is hitting this major fault line in the European Union's chart. And this is happening at the time when Trump has unleashed these tariffs, which really are going to hit the EU economy. I mean, they may not have been quite as bad as expected, but it is certainly going to have an impact on the European Union. And you can imagine with this chart how Europe is going to respond and how it's going to dig down. And this also links with Ukraine. And so I do think that this puts Europe under a lot of pressure. On the plus side, for Europe, Uranus is going to move into Gemini soon. It won't go back onto this point. And it may be that Europe will be left alone to some extent until the Jupiter-Saturn opposition in 2029, when you've got Jupiter, you've got Jupiter opposition, Jupiter will be in, let me get this right, Jupiter will be in Scorpio and Saturn will be in Taurus. And that will be in a few years' time. That will be 2029. And I think that is perhaps when the European Union is at risk of starting to really fragment. I don't think we can expect the European Union to fragment now, but I think I'd probably give it until the end of the decade, and we'll see how it manages the Jupiter-Saturn opposition. So another organization that might be hit by Uranus on the Mars-Saturn midpoint is Palestine. So if we take this chart, Palestine, if we take the declaration of Palestinian independence at 12:40 a.m. in Algiers, because that didn't happen in Gaza or in Palestine or in the West Bank. It happened in Algiers. The Uranus is exactly on the midheaven, and it's pretty close to the opposition of the Sun. So this Uranus on the Mars-Saturn midpoint may be really hitting Palestine. Now, you might say that that's connected simply with Israel's renewed attacks on Gaza. So that might be one manifestation, but it might actually be more fundamental than that. It might be that Uranus on the Mars-Saturn midpoint is having an impact on how Palestine sees itself, how the Palestinian authorities, whether in the West Bank or in Gaza, are managing things, and they may have a realization that something has to change. Also, it's going to sort of likely or could increase violence. So it's not great for Palestine, and it may say something about what the leadership is doing, what the leadership is deciding, and what kind of pressure the leadership might be under. Now, this Uranus on the Mars-Saturn midpoint does also impact someone I've been talking about quite a lot recently, and that's the Canadian Prime Minister, Mark Carney. We now have a time of birth for him, and he has 2515 Taurus on the ascendant. So that means that Uranus is exactly on his ascendant, and that also means that Uranus is on the Mars-Saturn midpoint. So the transiting Mars-Saturn midpoint is on his ascendant, and so that's an issue for him. It's a double issue for him because Mark Carney is a Uranus on the Mars-Saturn midpoint person anyway. He has Uranus. There's his Uranus. His Uranus is square his Mars-Saturn midpoint, as I discussed yesterday. So he's got Uranus square his Mars-Saturn midpoint anyway. And now the transiting Uranus on the Mars-Saturn midpoint is hitting his ascendant. So we already know that Mark Carney has got a lot of work to do. He's trying to sort out the tariffs and everything else, and how is he going to respond to the US? So, and he's got an election campaign, but it may be that over the next few days, Mark Carney has to deal with an extra pressure, something that he wasn't necessarily expecting. So, Mark Carney, someone already in the news, and he might be even more in the news because of this Uranus crossing his ascendant. And I think that this weekend it could be quite a difficult weekend for him, and not just this weekend. Remember this transit, Uranus on his ascendant. It happens. It was at the time of that first quarter moon, and this first quarter moon, I think, could last for another week. And I just can't forget Donald Trump, of course. And Donald Trump, of course, this is on his midheaven. But I don't really have to say anything about it, do I? We already know that Donald Trump is under a lot of pressure, and he's putting a lot of other people under a lot of pressure. So he's another person who's going to have a busy weekend. And finally, for something completely different, I do watch too many YouTube videos, and the same kind of channel that cannot stand that woman I can't mention, because I promised not to mention, or I almost promised not to mention her until the autumn. They also have another target, and their other target is this actress Rachel Zegler, and I've had her chart on file for some time, but I haven't had an opportunity to say anything about it. Again, not someone I'm particularly interested in, but there's this film Snow White, which has been widely panned, and it's woke, and supposedly, not that I've seen this film or know really anything about it, and Rachel Zegler is the woman who's playing Snow White, and she's said some things which appear to be very ungrateful, and she has been critical of the traditional Snow White story as it's too patriarchal, and describing the story as being weird, as the behavior as a prince as being weird, and her outspokenness, which some people say has cost Disney a lot of money and has really undermined this film that has cost hundreds and hundreds of millions to put out. And she has apparently been undermining it and been ungrateful, and has sort of made videos about it. And she's kind of just showing off her chart, isn't she? She has got Mercury square Uranus. People with Mercury square Uranus can be very outspoken, and they can say things which cause upset. They can sound very rude. J.D. Vance, by the way, has Mercury square Uranus. So J.D. Vance and Rachel Zegler might be poles apart ideologically, but they have that same Mercury square Uranus. It would be actually quite interesting for J.D. Vance and Rachel Zegler to have a conversation with each other. That would be interesting with those Mercury square Uranus clashing with each other. But her Mercury is at 2450 Taurus, and so that means that she's got Uranus on her Mercury. So probably with Uranus at around 23, 24 Taurus, that's been why she's been saying all these things, and she can't help herself because she just feels she has to say it. That's the nature of who she is. I'm sure Mercury square Uranus has played a big part in terms of shaping her talent and her abilities, but right now Uranus is on her Uranus right on her Mercury, so that could be bad news, or something happens which is difficult for her, or she might just want to say something. And so if I were to advise Rachel Zegler with Uranus on her Mercury, I would say, perhaps she needs to keep her opinions to herself for the moment, but I think it's going to be very difficult for her to keep her mouth shut with Uranus transiting her Mercury. And of course, the Mars-Saturn midpoint is transiting her Mercury. So something she says could cause her problems, or it just might be news about how she's been treated in the industry or something like that. So those are a few thoughts about what's happening today, sort of what's happening over the weekend. And it is quite a busy weekend with first quarter moon, Mars trine Saturn, Venus trine Mars, and with Mars, so with Uranus still on the Mars-Saturn midpoint. So I hope you have a great weekend. I do hope you enjoyed this video. If you did enjoy this video, I'd be very grateful if you were to like it. If you're not subscribed, I'd be super grateful if you were to subscribe. If you want to buy me a coffee, there's a link in the description, and I will talk to you again very soon.